Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and I'm here once again with Cat McBerry.
Bonjour, you cheese-eating surrender monkeys! Oh wait, wrong class. Oi! Oi, oi, oi!
And Doug McBerry.
What do we want? Jock's dog! When do we want it? Jock's dog!
And welcome back, my friends, to the Disney debate, where today everyone is Scottish. You're Scottish, I'm Scottish.
We're
If
actually
it's Scottish, it's crap!
and that's a fact.
I mean,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
actually Scotch-Irish, so like I want to say quarter Scottish. They're actually Scottish.
I mean, I'm probably about as Scottish as you are, if we're being honest here. I'm a lot of things. And that Scottish is honestly one of the least things I am, ironically enough.
Well, yeah, I'm a mutt.
half
I'm a bit of a mutt, but much like today's subject. But Doug, how Scottish are you?
I think I'm about half. I know my dad's been doing like a lot of genealogy. I know there's definitely English, some French, Irish in there. I ultimately I'm kind of Euro trash, but I know definitely a lot of Scott.
You're probably the most Scottish out of all of us here.
More Scottish than you.
You hear that, Zen and Cat? I'm more Scottish than you.
He's not even wearing a kilt.
Trust me, I've been trying to do that for years.
Now, you will all salute
we
the
recently
haggis.
We recently finished diving into DuckTales, and Robbie Burns is coming up soon. So we're kind of in a Scottish mood, and it's kind of funny because the next film that we're discussing on the Disney debate is Greyfriars Bobby. Now, I was very confused because I've heard the name before, but I had no idea what this was going to be about. And it's one of those titles that doesn't give away the movie. Like, the computer wore tennis shoes, that has, like, me thinking about things. Flubber, I can kind of form something in my mind, but Greyfriars Bobby, I was confused by the title alone. And that's kind of where I want to start, because I think this is probably one of the worst titles that Disney has come up with. Not that it isn't a good movie, it's just, I don't, Kat, like, when you first heard this title, what were you thinking?
I honestly had no clue either. I assumed it was about a church or people from a church, given the word friar. So I thought we were going to see something of that nature, given how Disney in the early days leaned a lot toward religious imagery. So, yeah, I didn't really know what to expect either, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself, that, because this is a big, thing in Scotland, and, one of their legends, and I had never heard of it before watching this movie.
And what about you, Master Doug?
Yeah, no, I had no previous knowledge of this, although I think I'd heard, maybe a little bit in terms of the myth, but not really, knowing any of the story. And of course, seeing, the title, it looked like it was, there was going to be a dog in it, and that's about all I knew. So this was completely, new territory to me.
Yeah, like, I had no idea about the legend itself, so, like, going into it, I was a little bit, and then I saw, like, I went on Disney Plus. It's actually available on Disney Plus for the first time in a while, so I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, it's a story about a dog and his boy, kind of like Old Yeller. It's not that either. So, like, all my preconceived notions kind of went out the window. And it's one of those things where I feel like maybe they had marketing better back then, but I had no idea of this film, and my perception kind of changed as it went along. I do think it's a good film, but Kat, why don't you give us a brief rundown of this film, and we can discuss the Scottish dog.
Sure, I'll give you the briefest of synopsis. You ever saw Futurama? You ever saw that gut-wrenching episode about Fry's dog Seymour? Yeah, they made a whole movie about that. That's what this movie is. This is about Seymour and how, after his owner died, he waited at his grave for the next 14 years, just watching over him, waiting for him to come back, and he never does. That is this movie. So if you want your heart to get kicked in the nards for 2 hours straight, yeah, that's this movie in a nutshell. But no, actually, I lie. I embellish. It for the most part, that's how it starts. But if anything, this is more about how a town comes to appreciate the loyalty of a dog to the point where he pretty much becomes like the town's dog. And it kind of like he becomes this like popular celebrity, and everybody knows him, everybody knows his routine, and everyone's just so enamored with his loyalty that he becomes just he's basically given like the town like key, like the key to the city in a way. Like it's honestly a really sweet story when you look at it overall, and you see just like how many lives he touched just by being himself, and like how he unintentionally like influenced some of the policies of said town. Like I honestly was getting a little like choked up toward the end watching this. Like, I won't lie, because I had a feeling that I was worried that this was gonna end the same way Futurama did, but thankfully it doesn't go that far. Thankfully.
This is one of those films that I did not expect, and I think what really sells it to me is, if you've seen One Piece, there's an episode in the Buggy arc that touches upon a dog named Shushu. And Shushu's owner has passed away, and they were both the owners of a pet shop. Like they sold pet food, and so he kept guard of the pet food shop, and the whole episode is about that. And this is also based on a Japanese legend of a dog named Hachiko who had the same type of thing, loyalty to an owner who had died. And it's one of those constants that I see throughout a lot of these things. Like, yeah, maybe not exactly Balto, but like Hachiko, Shushu, all these legends of dogs who have just been loyal. And it's been a legend for ages with different dogs, because dogs have this, I guess, innate loyalty in them. Granted, I have never had a dog, but it's a classic story, and I think what really works about this story is how much heart there is in it. And I will not get the pacing. I feel like in a lot of the film, it's way too slow, but like it really tugs at your heartstrings, because this dog's owner dies, and like it takes a while to get to that point, but like it's about this dog trying to keep living in this world and touching the lives of the people around him. And I think that part really got to me. I will say though, man, Doug, aren't the Scottish all this stubborn when it comes to medicine?
I don't know about medicine, but the Scots are definitely a stubborn people.
Yeah, because like,
and frugal.
Old Jock, who is the former owner of the dog, refuses to go to the infirmary even though he has pneumonia, and he dies. And like the whole like large part of it is like he's wandering around town trying not to be taken to the infirmary, and that's like a large part of the first half of the film. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, because he keeps saying like, oh, I'd rather just die out here and whatever, and not be with anybody than go to the infirmary, because only the poor go to the infirmary and they don't come back anyway. So what's the point? I'm just gonna die. But the problem is, Bobby chases him for like 8 miles to Edinburgh, and makes himself just there. So now it's like, oh, Jock's got to take care of him too, but he's doing a really lousy job of it. And it's like he goes to all these places that he's known for. It's like, and plus the Bobby knows, every time that gun goes off, the cannon goes off, it's time to eat. And so they go to that Mr. Tail guy who's like very generous with the food. And it's like, even Mr. Till's like very conscious of Bobby and of all Jock to a fault. And he's like trying to get him to go to the freaking infirmary and just, nope, not having it. It's just like pure stubbornness. And, Mr. Till doesn't even really make that much of an effort to get him to go.
I mean, to be fair, he was an old man. He probably knew his time was coming, and he rather would have just died on his own terms as opposed to, like, being thrown in with the rest of the sick and then dumped in, like, a ditch somewhere once he died. Because, I mean, let's face it, this is like the 1800s. Hospitals, infirmaries, they were not that clean back then.
And also, apparently, everybody knows old like... Jock in town. So it's like nobody's going to try and take care of him, or, he's not going to, let them try to help him. He's just that stubborn.
It's pride. It's a pride thing, Poor guy gets laid off of his job. He can't be a shepherd anymore. He only has his meager savings, and, like, he just doesn't want people to pity him, even though that's ultimately what they do. Like, typical guy pride.
Well, you see, I have to die on my own terms. I have to go out swinging, and I will fight, and he dies in his sleep, which is, that's something, but yeah.
And apparently he's Russian now.
Old Jock dies in his sleep, and he gets buried in the cemetery where, like, a bunch of the saints and, like, the important people are buried. And so Mr. Trail, who, owns this restaurant in town, tries to take in the dog, but the dog doesn't want to have any of it. And the kirkyard keeper, I believe his name is supposed to be James Brown, not that one.
I feel good.
Feel good.
You know James Brown. I know a James Brown.
So James Brown is owner of the kirkyard. He's like, oh, no dogs are going to be in my kirkyard. I can't have it. And it's funny because, like, there's this whole sequence where they argue, like, that's your law. You wrote it that way. And if you look at the note, it says, by order of James Brown, no dog should be in the kirkyard. I'm like, yeah, it's your order, so why do you have that? So it's this whole battle between Mr. Trail and Mr. Brown about whether or not this dog can go into the kirkyard. The whole time, Bobby just keeps going and laying down on the grave of his master, and, like, nothing's happening. And eventually they all just take to this dog, and I guess you can say the orphans of the town take to this dog, and they become friends, and, like, their lives get better by knowing the dog. And because of it, Mr. Trail is helping the kids, getting them jobs and teaching them how to read, and like figuring out places for them to be going to school. Whereas the James Brown is over here like, oh, I'm taking the dog, I'm gonna wash up the dog, and the dog has a job here killing the rats. And I'm just like, like, okay. It's a strange film, but I love it. Kat.
Yeah, you know that meme, that joke that when a family loses a dog, or, they want a dog, but then the dad is like, oh no, I'm not taking care of this dog, I want nothing to do with this dog, you have to take care of it, and then the dad ends up getting super attached to the dog. Yeah, that's what happens in this film. Except that it's not just him, pretty much him, Mr. Trail, the orphans, pretty much a majority of the town end up co-parenting this dog, and he kind of just flits in between all of them, like one of those stray cats that, like, goes to different people's houses to, like, because they feed him. So he kind of just, like, operates on his own schedule. Like, it's kind of like the whole, Pavlovian experiment. Every time the cannon goes off, oh, it's lunchtime, time to go to Mr. Trail, and it's like, oh, it's sundown, time to go to the cemetery. It's like clockwork, basically. And he goes between them. They, feed him. They do whatever to help him. But by the end of the night, he's sleeping on that grave, no matter what. So it's pretty much just watching this dog do his routine and just somehow drastically changing the lives of everyone around him in doing so.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting concept, and the thing that gets me about it is, like, we've seen a lot of films in the Disney lineup that are just okay. They don't have enough substance. They don't have a lot to talk about. I don't think this film has a lot to talk about, but it's this weird thing to me where I would still really recommend this film because it is very heartwarming. And I hope, I don't believe there was any animal abuse in this film. Now, here's the thing. You can tell that they use, like, many different dogs for this film because it changes in size, it changes in color. So I'm pretty sure they use, like, 5 or 6 different dogs for this film. But they don't have him doing anything dangerous. And so it's like, it's a very heartwarming film throughout all of it. Pacing could use a little bit like work because there's a lot of parts that do just kind of drag, but at the same time, I never felt my attention wandering. I never felt myself looking at the clock. I just was like, okay, like, this is really interesting. It's heartwarming, it's wholesome. It's not something I would watch, but for its time period, I think it works really well. What do you think, Doug?
I mean, yeah, it's ultimately harmless, and it's like, yeah, if you can get over the pacing of it, it's a pretty sweet film. Obviously, it is ultimately, I would not say there's nothing going on, because it ultimately does come down to, like, who ultimately owns the dog, and it's like, it's weird, because obviously, he technically had an owner, but the owner is dead, and there's a guy that takes care of him, but he doesn't, feel that he has the right to own the dog, and the dog is kind of its own owner, and then, the dog is residing in James Brown's Kirkyard, and yeah, that he says he doesn't want anything to do with them, but he's still, like, providing a service for him and getting rid of the pests. And of course, all the kids want to be with him, but the dog's not really interested. And it ultimately comes down to, a police officer noticing that this dog is not registered. And that becomes a whole thing. And it's really frustrating. Like, that ultimately becomes the climax of the film. It's like, even like the kids are trying to get the money together to, get a license for him. Even James Brown finally turns around and is, thinking that, okay, I do want to own the dog. I'll pay for the license. And then Mr. Tail's like fighting for him, but, he could easily just pay for the license and let the dog be, but he's too stubborn on that.
It's a matter of principle.
It gets very frustrating is what I'm, ultimately saying in this.
I mean, I can sort of understand why they wouldn't want just one person, because you do have to renew a dog's license at a certain point, and it's like, if the dog's technically not yours, like, do you really want to be responsible for that? Plus, as they try to make the point, the dog belongs to everyone and belongs to the town, technically, so if anything, they should grant him amnesty based on the fact that, he's both ownerless, but also owned by everyone. So, like, they make a compelling argument for it, surprisingly enough. Like, at first I was frustrated, because I'm like, guys, just pay the license. This dog's gonna be put down if you don't give him a license. But, by way of showing how he's affected all of them, how he he basically changed a lot of their lives for the better. It convinces like the head guy, who just so happens to be the Lord Provost of Edinburgh, and who also heads the Scottish Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, to make him think, you know what, this is a special dog. I'm actually going to pay for his license for life, and he's going to wear a special collar that shows that he's the celebrity of this town, and nobody can do a damn thing about it. And I mean, that's kind of impressive when you think about it.
Yeah, there's a lot I like. Like, the first part is about old Jock, and that's the first third. The second third is about, like, how, they all come to be in the graces of this dog. And the third part is, like, that episode where Scrooge is put on trial for his crimes, but it's a dog.
His crimes,
and it's just,
quote.
And it's funny because, like, you have this really square-jawed constable who I just wanted to punch him in the face. He comes up and he's like, "Is this your dog, man?" "It's not my dog. I see you housing it. It must be your dog." I'm like, no. Like, you can clearly see that he doesn't have a collar. Like, it's this whole thing. So parts of it are frustrating, but there's parts that I do like when they actually go into the court and they're like, "This dog is a menace. He needs to be put down." And the dog's just lying belly up like, "I'm a dog. I'm awesome." It's like, "This vicious animal, he needs to be put down for the safety." It's just like, and you see he's just laying up. And then another thing is just like, I heard from the priest at the kirkyard that this dog came around. Like, the priest knows that he lives in the kirkyard. Of course he does. Everyone. Oh.
It's basically an officer being a dick for no reason.
Yeah, well, then again, it is Scotland Yard.
Yeah.
They know what they did.
Yuck.
So yeah, like, all in all, it's an interesting film in many respects because there's 3 disparate parts. And on paper, it sounds like it should be one of those, old school books where it's just a bunch of things that happen and no rhyme or reason. But here, I feel like it actually flows quite well. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than Nicky. It's better than Nicky the Wild Dog of the North. So it's like, for its time, I think it actually worked pretty well. I liked the characters. I liked how things tied back into each other. How, James Brown and Mr. Trail had arguments, and at the end they come together to have a pint together under their roof because they didn't have friends and they're both lonely. There's a surprising amount of depth to these characters, too. Because I think Mr. Trail was the biggest one, because throughout the film, like, he's constantly like, "Oh, I've served a lot of people in this town, and they had a lot more manners than you do," and he cares for the dog. It's like, if I roughed up anyone who sat down at my table, I'd be roughing up you. And like, he has a lot of really great principles to him, and he helps the orphans. But like, he explains it at the end where he's like, he feels responsible for old Jock's death because he went to get the doctor, and if he had just stayed with him, maybe he could have like encouraged him to wait or something like that. And so he's just like, and then part of it is he's lonely, but because of this dog coming into his life, he's meeting all these people, making all these friends. It's like one thing leads to another, and I really liked Mr. Trail as a character more than I thought I would. He's old, he's curmudgeonly, he sticks to his principles, but he's a lot of fun. What do you think, Kat?
No, I agree, definitely. If it wasn't for Mr. Trail, like, Bobby definitely would have A, starved, and B, be put down. Not to mention, those kids wouldn't have had a future, because let's face it, this is like 1800s orphanage here. Those kids didn't stand a chance. So
we're gonna get you some nice crutches.
So, like, yeah, it was interesting to see, like, the whole, like, domino effect the dog had, by virtue of giving a lonely man company, he extended that friendliness to other people and helped better their lives. And here's the thing, like, because I actually did a lot of research, like, on the real Greyfriars Bobby, just to compare and see what was different in the same from the film. And Mr. Trail actually was a real person. Like, and he did actually feed the dog, his same meal times and everything. However, there is one detail that's kind of omitted, and I think it adds to a few inaccuracies that we see in this film. It's the fact that Mr. Trail apparently liked to tell tall tales. So he kind of brags saying that he knew Bobby more than he claimed to. Cause, he actually, was sort of new in town by the time he met Bobby. And, he hadn't known the owner that long. So, yeah, by the time he started to become famous, he was saying, oh, yeah, I've known him for years. I knew his owner for years. And, we used to do this together. And I taught Bobby this trick and da-da-da-da-da. And people believed him. And, I mean, it wasn't really anything egregious, but you could kind of tell he was embellishing. For instance, the one big inaccuracy in this movie is the fact that old Jock wasn't a shepherd. He was actually a constable, a night watchman, and Bobby was his guard dog. So that was their whole reason for being together. That's why they had such a deep loyalty between them. And, everything plays out as it did. It's just that, Mr. Trail didn't know them as well as he claimed to. And that kind of carried over into books that were written about him, and that book is what inspired this movie, hence the inaccuracy we get.
Also, according to what I'm looking at, and admittedly I'm looking at Wikipedia, so, the legends are different, but they said that he was a gardener who came to Edinburgh in 1850, so it's oh, and then he became a night watchman, okay. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that this film does not touch upon. So
yeah, the whole family that Jock worked for didn't exist. I don't know why they were in this film, to be quite honest. I guess just to put Jock in the situation where he dies in poverty. But they didn't really need all that, if we're honest. And it's actually really misleading because they use the family in the promotion of this film. Seriously, if you Google the film, you look at the covers and everything, a lot of them are of the farmer's daughter holding the dog. And it kind of gives you the fake impression that, oh, this is about a little girl and her dog. It's no, she holds the dog for 2 seconds, and the dog runs away with her and never comes back.
Yeah, the farmers are barely in this film. Another thing that is interesting... So, Gray reportedly died of tuberculosis in 1858, not pneumonia like they say in the film. Mm-hmm. And his grave was toppled by vandals in 2018. So, I think his ghost is going to come after them.
Honestly, it would make sense, because where he's buried, Greyfriars Kirkyard, is actually considered one of the most, haunted cemeteries in the United Kingdom, if not the world. Not just Bobby's ghost is running around catching rats. There are other people that are buried there, and they apparently have a notorious poltergeist as well. So it's definitely one of those spots where if you're a ghost hunter or something, you definitely should visit there. I don't know if they'll allow you in at night though. That's the thing.
Some say old Jock still haunts these tombs, waiting to find the vandals who stole his Bobby. But yeah, the family, the family farmers at the beginning are very superfluous. They're only there to be oh, well, we're in hard times, we can't afford you, and old Jock's it's okay, I don't mind. Old Jock's just very stubborn.
I will say I like the subversion that the dog actually prefers the old man over the kids, because usually it's the opposite scenario whenever you see movies like this. So I'm glad to see that the dog just doesn't give a shit about the kids and just wants to be with the old man. It's really heartwarming.
It's nice that we actually have the other characters though, because while I like old Jock, it wasn't really until Mr. Trail came into the film that I really started growing to like this film. And Mr. Trail and James Brown make it. And not just because James Brown is a legend, but...
yeah, he had a hit album before he had a hit album. We just never heard it.
It just, I like their back and forth between each other, and I like their fight where they smuggle the dog into the kirkyard overnight, and he gets out in the morning. He just somehow doesn't see this dog, and then instead of, it's like his wife being like, "Oh, get this filthy animal out me house." No, she's like, "Get this animal in me house," because she wants to give the dog a bath, and it's like this whole thing. It's just like, "Oh, I don't want no dog in my kirkyard. I'm never gonna like this dog," and then he likes the dog.
Of course, I told you, he's the grumpy old dad that didn't want a dog, and now it's his best friend.
It's like, "I swear to you, this dog is going home by midnight the next day." Oh, we're sleeping together, and he sleeps here, and like there's this whole back and forth between James Brown and Mr. Trail that I actually really found funny, especially because near the end, when they're starting the trial, he fakes being sick, but then shows up at the trial, and he's like, "Oh, it's too bad that James Brown couldn't be here. I mean, he's too sick to provide testimony," and then he shows up at the actual trial.
It's like Kramer versus Kramer, and you have the divorced parents that are always going back and forth, arguing over their kid, and like trying to find reasons for why the kid should stay with them, even though they're both totally inept to take care of him.
Doug, what do you think about these characters?
Again, honestly, Mr. Tail should be the rightful owner of Bobby. Because clearly he bends over backwards for this dog. It's not just about, feeding him. It's like, oh, he wants to take care of the owner. He wants to, make sure that he gets back to the farmer family 8 miles away, which is really the only reason that they're in there, to show just the length that this dog is going to go to, be with his original owner, even in death. He's like trying to smuggle him into the graveyard in the end. He's holding him at his place to make sure that the farmer family comes and picks up the dog. He's, making sure that he's taken care of by the kids and everything. It's like, dude, this guy should be the rightful owner. It's only because of his own, principles and things, and feeling that, Jock's his owner, and Bobby's never gonna see it any other way aside from hanging around occasionally with everybody, and especially if he gets fed. But it's just like, again, like I said, it's very frustrating where this whole thing could be resolved if Till just essentially paid for the license, because he essentially is taking care of this dog and has, cares very much for his well-being and cares what happens to him, is willing to put up this, legal fight, but not enough so that he will just outright pay for the license. And then, James Brown is basically, like you said, the dad that's like, "Oh, I'm not going to like this dog," and then loves the dog and is even at the end willing to pay for him, even if he's like very, reluctant to admit it. And then of course the kids. Oh, and then Mr. Till's also, he's very good to the kids. He wants to, make sure they're taken care of as well. He wants to try and get them to this school. Obviously, I can't speak for, the person that he's based on. I know, you take liberties with the story and everything, but going off of this character portrayed in the movie, that's how I feel.
Yeah, this is a very different film, and it's kind of hard. Like, I still recommend it, but like there's a lot of weird parts to it. I do like the idea of like a dog warming the hearts of everyone around him. But it's very different than, say, like Old Yeller or some of the other films that we've talked about. And there are definitely some frustrating moments and some slow parts. But I think it does come together, and I don't regret having watched it, which is something that's hard to say from this era, To be fair, and Greyfriars Bobby isn't a film that like a lot of people know about and a lot of people talk about. It's just one of those films that like it's very much of its era, but at the same time it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it flows better. It feels like it is more of a film. I mean, visually, it's pretty well done. It's clear that they filmed in actual locations in there. There's not a lot of like scenery backgrounds and sets. It's actual like places, which is pretty nice. I mean, it's clear they use different dogs. The actors are great, but like overall, I still say give it a watch. Personally, I think Greyfriars Bobby was surprising. It's not going to break anyone's hit list, but like I think it's a good film. What do you think, Kat?
No, it's definitely a watchable film, especially if you want to know the history of a real life dog and, why he's famous in that part of Scotland. Because, believe it or not, there is a statue dedicated to Greyfriars Bobby in Edinburgh. Like, I saw like videos of a walking tour. You see the dog there by the square, and he's displayed prominently and real cute. His nose is like almost gold covered because so many people pet it for good luck. Which, you really shouldn't do that because you destroy the finish on the statue, but I still think it's really sweet that everybody automatically boops the snoot whenever they see him. And
you have to boop the snoot. It's part of the tradition.
Yep. And he's also right across from a bar that's named after him. According to the Scottish people I've heard from, you're famous when you get a bar named after you. And not only that, the bar is like right between the statue and Greyfriars Kirkyard. So you go behind it, you'll see the final resting place of Greyfriars Bobby. Now, he wasn't buried in the cemetery because, it's consecrated ground and he's an animal, but they buried him just outside of it, so he's still technically, sitting guard. He's only a short way away from where John Grey is buried. And, I saw videos of, I think from 2022, where people were celebrating the 150th anniversary of his death. And, they gathered around his tombstone, they said some words, they told his story, kids were putting down toys and sticks and other memorabilias at his grave. They had a whole, blessing of the animals there. They raised money for the dog shelter. Like, it was actually on the news, like, in Scotland. It was a big celebrated event. And it's really nice that even now, 150 years later, people still fondly remember this dog. Like, it's really sweet.
And I really think it goes to show that animals can touch your hearts. I mean, I love my kitties, my fur babies. They're precious to me. If something ever happened to them, I would be very, very upset. And Kana is my pillow. She will always be my pillow. And Chiaki will always be my my little sneezily baby. I love her very much. And she sits in my lap whenever I try to sit down. So, like, cats are very loyal, dogs are very loyal, like, pets in general should be respected, and I respect this film for doing that service, and just, the fact that this dog is still celebrated so many years later says a lot. Doug, final thoughts?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's an ultimately harmless film. Wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it, but if somebody's asking, I'd speak well of it. Tell them, hey, give it a watch. It's not a huge commitment. It's like, an hour and a half. So yeah, it's a nice, heartwarming film ultimately, albeit frustrating, as I've stated over and over. But yeah, I mean, and it is nice to, learn about, a fictionalized version of the actual dog. And yeah, that's really all I have to say.
One thing I do want to mention, there actually was a remake of this, believe it or not. Like, I think in like 2005 or something like that. It was not by Disney though. It was like a UK production company. It was at Piccadilly Pictures, I think. And it's really weird the choices they made with this, because on the one hand, they corrected the inaccuracy about John Gray. They actually made him a policeman in their version. However, they omitted Mr. Trail for some reason, even though, he was a real person that actually interacted with Greyfriar Bobby. And instead they make a kid, basically embody his role, and the kid is the one that is taking care of the dog and advocating on behalf of the kid and everything. And ultimately, when they end up in that courtroom scene, the person who's playing the prost, the judge, is Christopher Lee, which is fun.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, Christopher Lee's in this, and it's funny because in the marketing, they're promoting him as starring in it, but he's only in the final scene where he declares that Bobby is owned by the town and he will have a collar and he gets special privileges and stuff. That's the only scene he's in the entire movie.
Is this a prequel to The Hobbit? Is this why he became evil?
I guess. Well, he definitely, what was it? Cause Greyfriars Bobby definitely became, Bobby the White, because in the original, in actuality, Greyfriar Bobby was a Skye Terrier. So those who don't know what it is, a Skye Terrier, think the dog Toto from Wizard of Oz, if you threw a blonde wig on top of it. That's basically what a Skye Terrier is. And, it's not as furry, but this dog was definitely super dog in that, it did a lot more than a Skye Terrier is capable of. But it definitely didn't look like the dog in this movie, because this dog, what was the breed? It was a West Highland White Terrier. It looks nothing like it, and apparently it pissed people off so bad they actually protested the movie. For this, the whole...
And there's one shot where it's a sheepdog too. It's shaggy sheepdog.
It's I get why they couldn't get the actual breed, because believe it or not, Skye Terriers are actually kind of endangered at this point. They haven't been selectively bred in a long time. I think, according to records, there's only 40 living purebreds on record. So I can sort of see in terms of the filmmakers, there's no way they were gonna get a hold of a purebred rare breed just for this movie. But yeah, I mean, for a dog as famous as that in Scotland, yeah, they should have been a lot more conscientious in terms of the breed they chose, though. At least make it look like what the breed actually is. This dog looks like it belongs on a can of dog food. That one with the white dog? That's what it looks like.
So in the end, it just turns into an episode of Futurama.
Pretty much. Like I said, this is the episode Jurassic Park, but extended to an hour and a half, 2 hours. And but it's not as tragic. It is tragic because the owner dies and the dog is waiting for him forever and he never comes back. But at the same time, the dog becomes a celebrity and he changes everyone's lives around him for the better. So bittersweet, I guess you can call it.
This is a film that I was kind of surprised by. I just feel what really hurts it the most are the pacing and some of the inaccuracies, especially with how much it gets wrong. And it's I get it, it's Disney, but pneumonia versus tuberculosis, come on,
It's all the plague. It's all the plague, and everybody dies. So what does it matter?
Oh, I got the plague. My leg, my cabbages, my corned beef. Wait,
he got COVID. He got COVID over a century and a half too early.
You're gonna get the Irish and the Scottish mad at you for that last one.
no one hates more than the Scots, or the Scots and the other Scots.
Damn Scots. They ruined Scotland.
With that being said, I am Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns.
I'm Kat McBerry.
I'm Doug McBerry.
And just remember, hug your pets today. Hug your fur babies. You never know. They're very loyal, and they love you. They love you unconditionally, and they're very good. So go hug your pets. Now,